Cloud. Hi, I'm Sarah, a 1-3 emotional projector,
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm a 5-1 splenic projector.
and welcome to our Human Design podcast. So, Laura, this is our very first podcast in this vein. However, we have done podcasts in the past. Wow, let's try saying that 5 times fast. Podcasts in that were kind of more, I guess, centered around transits that are happening. And because we are both, well, we're both right-minded and we're also both 1156 channels or defined channels, and we're both undefined G center people, it really feels a lot better to do something that's a little bit more off the cuff and a little bit more storytelling centric, and just kind of going with whatever is inspiring to us in the given moment, and then just relating it to human design. I feel like that's a good summary of what we're attempting to do right now. What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, welcome back if you are our 2 subscribers to the Astro Alchemy podcast. Thanks for having stuck around with that one. But as for like third line fashion, Sarah's a 1-3 and threes, they trial and error it out and bonds get made and broken. So the bond for that previous podcast was broken, and now it's being remade in this new shiny, bright, shiny form of whatever this is going to be for you all. And yeah, like Sarah said, we just want to have it be a bit more raw and unplanned and just au naturel for our human design selves.
True to form for who we
Yeah.
are. It's like funny because we're both deconditioning. Well, and I guess you could say we're both in the middle of deconditioning. And I had a little bit of a rude awakening recently because somewhere, someone on the Facebook group, one of the Facebook groups that's human design centric, said something along the lines of really deconditioning like happens, and you start to see it happening 3.5 years after 3 to 3.5 years after you start sleeping in bed by yourself.
Oh, wow.
um,
It's not when you start your experiment, it's when you start sleeping as yourself.
well, and potentially for non-energy types, or I'm sorry, for energy types, that's not true, right? So like generators, they can kind of, manifestors and generators can sleep wherever they want, whenever they want, with whomever they want. But like for projectors, um, you're kind of half baked if you, and I don't know the efficacy, like I don't know if that's actually true. I think we're all kind of living this out and seeing how things go, because I'm certain that the human design system started changing or affecting my consciousness kind of immediately once I realized that I was a projector, and then things had to kind of take their course, right? So I don't want, there's no fast and hard rules, is what I'm trying to say, except for the fact that it does take 7 years for your cells to reconvene, or not even reconvene, to just like completely be refreshed, except for your liver cells, which is another total tangential thing. But nonetheless, like that's kind of the reason that I had a rude awakening, because I was like, oh, I've only been sleeping as myself for the past two and change years. So that for me was like, okay, well, maybe that's why I'm still feeling like I'm half baked. Like I'm just like, I understand logically a lot of the system, but there's still this sense like of being just so much not self, and still like the not self is hanging on, and the illusion is still strong, but I'm starting to like pop my head out of it way more often. um so yeah, so there's just the truth and the reality of deconditioning in a nuanced way, as people who are still living in reality with other people who are not deconditioned, right? And even if they want to be, they aren't, so, like,
Well,
so
on that on that note, can I say something?
Yeah.
So part of human design is like we're breaking away from homogenization. And even within human design, there is homogenization. So like, yes, it is said you have to sleep in your own aura, but there's plenty of people that we see in the Facebook groups who don't sleep in their own aura, and yet they're still experimenting and catering it to themselves and what they're okay or not okay with. So it's there's a lot of like moral high ground I found in my personal experience with human design of like, these are the rules, you cannot break them. If you break them, then you fail. And it's for someone who's not self-exists in gate 21 of the ego center, which is control, like that's been my mind's conversation that it has with itself about how strict one has to be with human design. But that's not the point I wanted to make. I wanted to make the point, well, first off, that there's, sleeping in your own aura is a form of homogenization, even though you're doing it to not be homogenized. That statement in and of itself is homogenizing. But also, what was my thought? I wanted to say, like, hey, let's tell everyone how we came to human design. As you started talking about how you've only been sleeping in your own aura for 2 years. Oh, this is it. I feel it makes me feel like I have skin in, or like a head start in the game because I've been sleeping in my own aura for like a century. I am celibate, so that just like results in like not having to sleep in aura with anyone else unless I'm like traveling with that person, which happens rarely. So makes me feel like I got a head start, but not really. But yeah, tell everyone, Sarah, if you so care, about your introduction to human design and where you are in your journey and what's that like for you.
Well, one thing I will say is before, just because like I'm gonna sorry, but it's
Mhm.
the whole just concept of this dogmatic human design. Like when we're deconditioning, we're still in the program. There's still no choice, right? So in a sense, it's, we're not going to be able to do it the same way as everybody else does it because we're still on our own line of geometry, and it's just going to unfold the way that it's going to unfold. And so people getting in the weeds before they're into their first 7 years, it's like, well, everybody's not self, like deconditioning is going to look different. Secondly, um,
Mhm.
the thing that it is human design is, it's not necessarily homogenizing you, it's the conditioning you. Like we are conditioning ourselves by being in our own aura as opposed to being around other people. Everything's conditioning. And so
You can't ever turn it off at the same time. So
you
there's
can't,
no escape route.
there's no escape. Everything, it's conditioning. Either I'm conditioning myself with myself and the transits, or I'm conditioning myself with somebody else and the transits. Like it's all always on. So just to speak to how I came to human design. I was into astrology for a very long time. Very, 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 very long time. And sometime in 2019, I think it was like May of 2019, I was talking to one of my best friends, and she basically brought up, she's like, "Oh, have you ever heard of human design?" Because the girl that she was working for at the time was like getting really into it. So this is 2019. And so and the girl actually happened to be, I believe, well, she was definitely a projector. I don't know what her authority was. But anyway, so I looked up human design, I looked up my stuff, and I found out that I was a projector, and I still, was deeply interested and a student of astrology. And so the I guess the way that I'd want to say it is just like, what human design was and is so much deeper than you can get to by basically just looking at your chart or the first time around. You need to get the itch. You need to get, there's like something that happens when you are deeply interested in something. And the itch didn't completely overtake my life then. So that was like May 2019, but I did identify with being a projector then. Laura, how did you first come to human design?
Yeah, I just want to identify that itch as like the first line insecurity and fear that it needs the first first line, color, tone, etc. It's the itch. That's where it comes from for me, at least. I also have a background in astrology, but it wasn't astrology that brought me to human design. It was a manifester. So my sister's husband's sister, so I'm not related to her directly by blood in any way, but she brought it up in passing, I think some point in 2018, and just like gave a very crude, like, I went to this person and she told me this thing, and I'm a manifester and my husband's a generator, and it's based on birth time. And like that was it. And I was just like, okay, you do you. I don't know, I don't trust whatever you said. Like, you just gave no credibility to it whatsoever. You just, brought it up in super quick passing. I thought it was something like ENFP. And then several months later, I just got the investigative itch to like look at what it was that she said. This is like probably 6 months later. I was like, what is that thing she once talked about? And so I like put in manifestor generator into the internet track because I didn't know the words human design. I didn't know what it was called. And I was trying to figure out what exactly it was that she was talking about. And I came across probably Jovian's website, one of the websites, and generated my chart and saw I was a projector. And I was like, meh, not for me. Like, I have astrology. I'm good. No thanks. And then a couple months later after that, I was like, wait, what actually was that thing that I was looking at before? And I started doing more research, and I just like kind of dove in right away. I'll say that like I kind of started to wait for invitations as a projector immediately. At that point in time, I was so I wanted to initiate the process of going to either acupuncture school or massage therapy school. And this was like coinciding with the time, or concurrent with the time, that I was beginning to understand what it means to be a projector. And I was like, wait, I'll just wait. I'll do absolutely nothing and see what happens. And then quite a few months, like almost a full year, not a full year, and then like 10 months, something like that. After that, I received an invitation for massage therapy school, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, I was kind of like right out of the get-go all about the not doing anything and waiting, because something that a reflector once told me is that like you've been living as you your entire life. So you've been a quote unquote projector your entire life, or whatever design you have, but even though it's like not self, but it's still like there are moments that you've experienced satisfaction and frustration, bitterness and success and disappointment and surprise, and maybe you just didn't understand why those things happened, but they did indeed happen, and that memory is cellularly inside of you. And so I have 6447, which makes sense of the past. So part of the way my brain works is to make sense of the past. And so it just reflected on all the situations in which I did indeed initiate, or I did indeed wait, and like what energetically resulted from those actions or lack thereof. And yeah, it was fairly easy to like hop aboard the don't do anything train, but it's resulted in a very lackluster life of like not a lot happens. And it's kind of hard to accept that as one's fate, becoming a projector, to realize like we're not here. Well, maybe not everyone. Sarah might disagree with her third line body life, but not everyone's here to experience a hell-mel, like chaotic, so much growth, so much advancement, so much building, generator, action-packed life. That's a very poor way of putting together words to describe something, but hopefully the idea makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like many different things just got pulled up in me, but until the first 7 years, you don't even really get to see what your cross is all about.
No,
And so,
not even still. Not even
no, no,
still.
no.
I mean,
Well, like,
I don't know for you, but
well, no, and I mean, it's like, so there's a lot of like stepping out. It's like you're melting the old self off of you during the 7 year period. And like, not a lot needs to be happening, frankly, but it's
yeah.
hard to like live in a world where everything's constantly moving, and you're seemingly standing still, but really what you're doing is becoming who it is that you actually are, which to me seems like the only worthwhile thing to be doing anyway, but it doesn't mean that the external influences or the external opinions aren't going to become uncomfortable uh, during that waiting process. Now, what was the other thing that you said before that?
I don't know, but what you just said made me think of like for you and me at least with our undefined G center, there's the pressure to like figure out direction, figure out what to do, figure out the purpose and who we are and all this. That's like constantly buzzing in the background. So what you just said, I feel like for you and me is a reflection of our undefined G's, but I don't know what else I said. Sorry.
Oh
I
yeah.
interrupted.
No, what I was gonna say, no, that was a good add and share. And also when I had the realization when I was in 7th grade, so I was homeschooled until I was 8. And then, which I think is interesting because I know there's something to the 7-year cycle, but nonetheless. And then I went to private school until I was in middle school. And then middle school, I went to public school. And in public school, I had never been around so much of a sacral buzz. The entire first year that I was in public school, I did not talk to anyone but the teachers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I realized, I mean, it wasn't like I was so mute that like people were sending me like I would if I needed to talk, I would say something, but like the level of interaction that I had was so low and I'm like, "Oh, that was me being a deeply sensitive emotional projector." Like realizing, amplifying the G's of everyone else and just feeling the nervousness of having a defined emotional system, right? And so like just being like not and not trying to be a generator, like just realizing that all I could do was watch because I was so foreign and alien to these generators that I was around, or at least I felt that way, like I'm not the same as you. That led to all kinds of line 3 conundrums. But nonetheless, like you said, you have been a projector long before you found out about human design. Then you may have accidentally stumbled upon success, or there's some projectors that they have managed to be, I guess, nurtured by a family that supports their individuality to the extent that they are able to be what it is that they are without facing as much um homogenization, generally speaking. And that's true for generators and manifestors too. There are some that are just they've just been raised by specific people that allows them to be what they are, like unintentionally does something really great for their child, the parents do. um
Yeah,
but
I have a manifestor friend, and she was raised by parents who always like were so emotionally supportive, basically told her like you can do anything you want, like they believed in her. And I think that's great for a manifestor who is here to initiate and make an impact on the world because she believed she could make an impact. She believed she could pursue and initiate the things that she wanted. But that's not necessarily the case for everyone else who's here to respond or who's here to wait. Only manifestors are here to do, but like for her, it was great and it helped her, you know, get to where she was meant to be with her own life, even though she doesn't know human design or anything, but just reflecting on her and her upbringing. Yeah, I can see how parenthood really is a key factor in our conditioning.
well, and I look around so much, and like when I see people who are living their lives correctly, human design or not, I'm just super impressed by them, even if it's not like they manage something. It's like this is just the natural way that their life progressed. And that's ultimately like what I guess you could say I'm seeking. But if I had it, I don't know that I would have sought it out and become as obsessed with astrology and human design as I am. So it's kind of like the lack of having that contained environment that was able to promote my emotional projector 1-3 ness, like, is why I've become as, I guess, knowledgeable about human design as I have. It's like, I don't know where I would have been otherwise. And I think it was funny. I said to one of my friends, it's like some people really got the like I'm gonna be an artist incarnation. And
They have
like,
defined G's.
yeah, they have defined G's. But well, and I mean, for me, it's kind of like, it's like I need to go through, I'm going to go through a lot of trauma to discover what it is I'm not, incarnation, and like clear all of this stuff out of the genetic pool. So I mean, if you believe in that kind of thing, but yeah, it's funny to think about like why it is that we have become so obsessed with human design. And I think one of the most hilarious parts of it for me is that, I've always been infatuated, I guess, with defined G people, especially people with like really cool G centers, like ones who are like really themselves, just like the unique expression of it has always been, with my completely open G, like just totally fascinating to me. And I always was jealous of it. I've always been like, before human design, I was always searching for that in myself. And it's not there. It's not supposed to be. But now it's like my role has become, at least in my own mind, or what I want to do, is being able to look at other people's G centers, because that's what a projector aura does, and introduce them to themselves, because we have the capacity to have awareness for the other that the other typically can't have for itself. And so it's like I get my identity is identifying other people, which is an interesting, it's not the only part of my identity. There's a lot of different things, but that's part of it for sure.
Yeah, that defined G. Hey, I think it's interesting how you said you found other people's, like, not their identities, but their G centers fascinating in the sense that like they know who they are and what they want, and the jealousy that comes from that. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently in terms of the hypothetical relationships I have in my life, because again, celibate here. But just it's like the kids who say like I want to be a doctor when I grow up, or I want to be an astronaut when I grow up, and they just have this sense of like the direction that their life will take, and they're willing to pursue that and like know what that is for themselves. And I feel like I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, even though I am a grown up. It doesn't feel that way. It feels like that's still some elusive goal that we've been projected or conditioned to have as children. Like, okay, know where you're going, know what your 5-year plan is, know what your 10-year plan is. And that's just the left world. But now when I look at people with defined G centers, I think yuck. Like, I think like, ugh, like, I don't want to be conditioned by you, because you're going to impose yourself on me and you're not actually going to see me for who I am. And so now whenever I interact with defined G's, like it's okay in like very, very small, short bursts sometimes, depending on the person. But for the most part, it's just so overwhelming to experience it. And then for the hypothetical like relationship stuff, I wonder like what would be correct? It's we're conditioned to have the whole opposites attract notion of like you want what you're not. So the program will condition us to partner up with someone who has a defined G, so that we can fulfill that sense of lack inside of us. But then thinking of people with also undefined G's, like though that's like is what creates sort of correct relationships according to Ron Human Design. Um, which makes me think like, okay, is it someone with a completely undefined G, or is it someone who hooks me up like you, Sarah? Sarah has 33 and I have 13. Sarah has a completely open G, but I have one hanging gate. And so together we create a sense of identity in each other. Clearly, as like astrology and human design nerds, there's like the sense of self that comes to us both when we interact with one another. But it makes me think of like, what is it like to be with someone else with whom there is no G definition? Like, is that the ideal? Is that what would be correct for the two people to experience life as they're meant to, so that they're not conditioned by that? I call it a pressure, but it's not a pressure center, but like the pressure to have purpose and to have identity and to have this sense of direction for your life. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, like you said, the program is AKA the not self, AKA the conditioning, the weather, and um all of that stuff is based on the genetic imperative for our line to continue, right? So like that's all it cares about. It doesn't care about if we're living out our design correctly or not at all. It doesn't care at all if we're, you know, living our cross at all. So that's something to consider, because as Laura said, what the genetic imperative would have us do is find someone that's completely opposite from us to keep the line going. And that right relationship, as far as human design is concerned, is related to us finding people who are similar to us. Now, I think that part of the delight that happens from us defining each other's G's is because we both know what it's like to not have to have undefined G's. Like we both lived our lives without them. And so like coming together and having a defined G when we're together, it's like we're not imposing our own G's on the other. We're kind of creating one. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
really.
but I've had that experience with other people too. And I don't know if it's the 30, well, I mean, one person in particular is my sister's mother-in-law. Um, and she has an undefined throat. I think the difference between that and this is we both have defined throats. And so we have things to say and we recognize each other for what there is to say. But like in the few, I feel like I don't have a lot of in-person experiences. I'm, I guess, a self-proclaimed hermit, but my sister's mother-in-law stayed with me for some time earlier this year, and she has an undefined throat in gate 33. So hooking up into me, like I gave her all this throat access. And because of that, she unconsciously, unintentionally was getting all this attention from me and she wouldn't stop talking. But that took over the relationship, that took over the G, because it was just feeding that identity into her. Not the identity, but just, I don't know, like I don't want to say she was an attention hog, but like she was. So, and I feel bad if she's listening to this, sorry. But it's mechanically speaking about it from like educational or scholarly viewpoint. Um yeah, I feel like there's a difference between how that G does get defined and whether or not it's fulfilling in its definition. I don't know. Now I
Yeah,
feel bad for roasting
I
her.
mean, I think it's so like chemical, like it's so based on like
Yeah.
our self strategies, and like just there's so much more to it, right? There's just so much more to it. And something that I know Ross says is that like, you know, with the advent of the raves, part of what they're gonna, the capacity that they'll have is to really get into the other, like not just on a like sexual level. They're not going to need it anymore. That's a whole nother that's a whole other podcast and conversation. That's a whole thing in and of itself. But that they're gonna like emotionally like be able to literally feel what somebody else is feeling and have the awareness from what they are aware of. But like until then, right now, like our passengers will never know what it's like to be like living inside of someone else. And I think that when it comes to all of these nuanced experiences we have with the other, you know, it's so hard to externalize them, even if you do have a defined throat, to like really explain to someone like how your experience is with one person versus with a different person versus with a different person. um it's just it's so specific. And you know, words are one thing about human design that I love, is that it's a language. And quickly as you start to get into it, you start to realize that there's all of these words that have multivalent meanings, and you need to start understanding the energy of these words and their multivalent meanings beyond just what the word is. Now, where was I going with that?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Right brain, right brain. I'm just gonna, my unconscious 1156 was telling a story and then it lost it. But um no matter, I guess, just to circle it back to what you were saying with your or trying to explain with the undefined G or the defined G, it's like I can't tell you why it is that certain people make me feel a certain way and other people don't. And it could be because of their level of deconditioning, their level of sensitivity, their level of awareness, or just
I think
strictly
it's just
mechanical.
chemistry. Like
Yeah.
you can't pick who you like. It's just like your body picks and like the mind has nothing to say about it. Or it
Yeah.
has stuff to say about it, but it doesn't matter what the mind says about it because it's physical chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. Indeed, for sure. Um, something that I wanted to just kind of talk about, and one of the things that I wanted to do on this podcast is to be able to explain experiences in life that, are happening in real time as we attempt to decondition. And so just something that happened to me recently is I started following my PHS as far as diet is concerned. And I've had stomach issues, which is pretty as standard as you can get for a split definition emotional projector who hasn't been living correctly for 3 decades. Like very normal stuff to
Not
have.
33 decades, just 3 decades. 33
30
years, three
30
decades.
30 decades. I am a million years old, everybody. I'm a vampire. Fun fact too, vampires came out at the same time as they dropped the same year that projectors dropped. Like that's when Dracula and stuff came out. It was like right at the end of the 1700s, but no matter there. What was I gonna say? Oh dude, what did you just say?
PHS, you're talking about
PHS,
PHS.
PHS. Okay, thank you. Um, Stomach issues and the fact that I started following my PHS and my PHS is calm touch for how it is that I'm supposed to eat. And so basically it's a very Ra had this PHS and it's a very what he calls is a perverse one to have because what it requires basically is that you eat completely alone without any distractions. And I just wanted to report that I've had an incredible reaction. It's not been fully, completely changed everything, but I've had a really, really positive reaction to doing this, to eating in calm. And like also, it gave me a chance just to see how much we live in a binary because my conditioned tendency is to eat exactly the opposite of that. It's to eat while I'm running around, driving, basically anything but present. I love watching TV and eating snacks, like so much fun for me, or at least it was. And then I realized like when I was eating in a calm way where it was me and my food, we're in a relationship, we're like hanging out, my digestion was just completely different. And it's and it made me realize like, oh, this translates to everything that I consume. Like this is how I'm supposed to consume things in every way. And when I'm not doing that, it's because it's a binary. I'm conditioned to the opposite, basically to transfer in an opposite way, equal but opposite way. And so I could see how my not self has always just loved that kind of behavior and how just basically how unable I was to see my not self until I started eating in that calm way. I was like, whoa, crazy. So yeah, I mean that was just something and I'll continue to report on that, but that was something that I wanted to mention because it's been one of the most physically shocking things that has happened to someone who's been into the Western medical model when it comes to their stomach issues and not really had any help in physical stuff. Laura, do you want to touch on anything in regards to that?
I don't think so.
Okay, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
don't think so.
Okay, well, one other thing I wanted to say too, and you might want to talk about, and this is one of the things that has blown my mind wide open about human design, just to continue on the same track. And that is that there are three different physical binaries that people fall into. In a sense, there's three different completely types of bodies, and like the way that those bodies consume and experience life are all so completely different. And this shocked me because, of course, we live in a world where we have a medical, Western world at least, there's a medical model of symptom management, essentially. So, something that Ross said is that medication is made by not self for the not self. It's like we're medicating the not self and not the self. And in all of my 32 years, I have never really had any type of Western medication work for me. There was an experience I had where I went on Accutane, and in a sense, it worked on my symptoms, but it never healed the underlying root cause of what was going on. And so, I've never ever been really impressed by any Western medicine. And I wondered why this was, because I saw other people it works for, like Western medicine, it works for them. And that's because there's 1/3 of the population, 1/3 of people fall into the binary on the physical side that's called the splenic binary. And this actually has to do with a physical change in the physical body that can lead to you being able to change, if you are sick, into sickness into health. Whereas people in the ajna binary, which is me, we heal through a conceptual framework. We heal in a conceptual way. And then there's the third kind of people, which is Laura. And sorry if I'm blowing you up, Laura, but she heals within the emotional binary, which happens in group settings. And I've always like known this, that it's mentally is where the work is for me. And I've always really resonated with the spoken word because it helps me change my perspective, which shifts my energy in a way that nothing else can. Um, and so I've just been amazed to see how that actually plays out, to look through all of my library of charts and see how other people measure in regards to these three different binaries. And just to think about the implications across our entire capitalistic society if we actually recognize that 1/3 of us are only supposed to be participating in group programs for healing, and the rest of us are not going to find any benefit from them, that 1/3 of us are going to heal conceptually and not by a physical medication, herbal remedy, or the like, and that 1/3 of us need to have our bodies adjusted literally in the material world in order for changes to take place. Like that would blow everything up. Like, Laura, were you as shocked with that? As I know you shared it with me, and I just it didn't even register until it like hit me recently.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I have a lot of different little thoughts to share about this. So hearing like well, first off, medication, I feel like just a disclaimer, I feel like the medical industry is made to keep people sick and to actually get rid of symptoms and not actually heal the root issue. So sometimes people just do need the surface adjusted. I feel like no medication really actually heals the core issue. It's just, a band-aid on a surface wound, but that's neither here nor there. For myself, not just healing, but like the design side takes in information. Like our PHS isn't just how we take in food. It's not just our dietary regimen. It's how our brain takes in life on like the body side. And so for me, that made a lot of sense looking at how I learn or previously learned. I always did well in school because I had a very chaotic external environment. I'm nervous touch, so I'm the opposite of Sarah. Well, not the opposite. I'm the same color, but the different um, fixation. I'm right and she's left. And so for me, having a nervous, stimulating environment was correct for me. And so it was easy enough for me to learn surrounded by people while someone lectured, and I would just take and soak everything in. And I hated homework because it just puts me in like the opposite state of being calm, being alone, not being stimulated, and no longer being in that group energy. Whereas like my feeling tone needs the groups, needs the interactions. And it's funny enough because in terms of like eating, whenever I would get to school, I would get hungry being in that environment and I'd eat my lunch in first period. Um, just because like that the chaotic, I call it chaotic, but just like people interacting with one another and like eating while learning was correct for me. So for me, like that experience was correct. And then it's funny looking at my adult self, like out of school I'm no longer learning in that way. And I always make an ongoing joke with Sarah. It's like, I need complete silence. Like, here talking to Sarah, like, the littlest things distract me. I need safety. I need security. I need the quiet. I need the peace. Um, and even when I learn now, I've kind of not wanted to ever sign up for any group class. I prefer to learn by myself. And it's like, I don't know why this is now as an adult after having graduated through school. Like massage therapy, like was fun and I could feel myself being in my prime. Just looking at my design and being in that group setting where we're physically, touching other people. It's very nervous touch. But learning human design and learning astrology, I do so in solitude. I've never wanted to take an astrology class. I've never wanted to participate in any group activity. So I don't know. I think it's really interesting looking at that now. But in terms of healing the body, I mean, same. I like my Facebook groups for the interaction there, and that's like where I'll go to if I have a question. But yeah, it's interesting to think like how does one heal the physical issues through energetically in groups, like through the energetic plane with others, because it's against what we're conditioned to believe by the world. Same with like, well, I feel like the Ajna binary is now more acceptable. Like you heal with the mind over matter, think positive thoughts, like all that affects the body with the Ajna binary in the sense that you don't need to take the medication, just envision yourself taking the medication, or like the people who can exercise by visualizing themselves exercising without actually moving their bodies. No, for me that doesn't work. But interestingly, for physical exercise, like it is absolute torture for me to physically exercise on my lonesome. But I think that's also being a motorless projector, but put me in a group and I am like one of the most active people in that group. And my body has so much more energy and so much more ability to exercise. But on my own, it is like pulling teeth. It's very unpleasant.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think that there's a few different reasons for like the things that you said. So because you have a line one body, line ones as investigators, like we do things, we investigate alone. Like it's part of like how we do what we do in the first place. And then being a motorless projector, I can with a motor, I can confirm that it's easier for me to exercise in groups as well. Maybe that's a G center thing or an undefined G center thing or an undefined ego thing. I don't know. But specifically for me, because of course I've been in groups and I've gotten like physical adjustments, massages, things like that too. It's not like you have to be taking in the world in one way. But I think when it comes to healing, well, not taking in the world in one way generally speaking, but when it comes to healing, and I think, Lora, I thought you took a women's health or like women's
It
cycle.
was one-on-one.
It
There
was
was
one
no group.
on one. Okay.
Yeah.
Still kind of group-ish, not really though. Um,
No, I feel like it was well, that's a fun story. Do you want me to share that story with everyone?
well, let
How
me
are we
just
on time? I can
uh
save it.
we can say, but one thing I just wanted to say too is like, so there's that, and then there's also, I was thinking the dream class or whatever, the group that you did.
Dream class.
There was like a class where you were, it was like a weaving something, and people were like going through different,
Oh,
different, like,
dream weaving.
yes.
Yeah, dream weaving was a community.
So,
It's a gift economy group.
yes. Okay. So, okay. Just as an
That's
example
true.
of a group's program that I would never be a part of. No, not because it's just mechanically I wouldn't join it. It would not, it would not transpire that way.
I mean,
And
interestingly, both those things that you mentioned, I was both invited to, and my spleen said yes.
yeah,
So the spleen, an inner authority can say yes to something that might logically on the surface seem incorrect, but it is correct. Or here in
well,
these
and
two examples,
it's
it's
nuanced,
correct.
and
Yeah.
it's nuanced. It's just it's nuanced where things work for, and it's not like either of those things were specifically for you to heal something specific within yourself. So, when I was listening to Raw on tones, design tones, this is where he was talking about this, and I'll probably end up listening to it many times because it was just so fucking mind-blowing, excuse my French, but um he really was speaking to it in regards to healing, and how there's this concentrated medical, like medical, it doesn't have to be Western medical, it could be Eastern medicine, but physical, like Ayurvedic, like detox kind of approach to the splenic binary people. Change your diet, right? Changing my diet is never going to heal me, no matter how much fucking kale I've eaten. As a line 3, I can experientially say that I have been healthier, quote unquote, based on what popular culture deems healthy, than anyone that I know. And it's never ever healed me. And the places, the moments that I felt real healing occur within myself, and it's still emotional, so it's occurring on a wave, is because of my framework, my mental framework opening up and shifting. And it's periodic, there's moments that it works. I can just speak to that in myself from my own experience, and then the group stuff, I don't know. I know people who have splenic binary, and I know people who have the emotional binary, and I've seen the emotional binary people gravitate towards being in group settings. Theoretically, you would think someone that's in like AA, that's what I said before, would be, but um it's so nuanced, and I don't want to say that group settings is correct for everyone in every instance. I really only think in regards to healing, if there's something physically wrong with you and you've tried everything else, this is a insane fact to consider in your healing journey, if you haven't. So yeah, so I know you're about to say something, Lora. I don't know if you remember what you were going to say now, but
No,
uh
I can hold off for another episode. It was about the invitations to those two things.
oh,
But
the invitation. Okay, yeah. About how your spleen said yes. I mean, you can share.
um now it's like now it lost its luster. It's not that exciting like
Okay,
it,
okay, then we'll share later. Okay,
there's
I feel
no
like
we've switched from desire to innocence. Like I could share, but I don't want to share. Like the flavor of my outer authority is no longer in desire. So we'll pass for another moment.
okay, okay. Well, as you can see, viewers slash not viewers, listeners, because we don't have video, but listeners, we are still deconditioning. We still don't know our ass from our elbow sometimes, that's for sure. And part of this, the intention, are very changeable open G intention is just to be true to where it is that we're at, and our real, very real struggle in the nuance of understanding how to decondition in a way that is true and real and not just mental games, mental internal games. So, if we said anything that was incorrect, that you think is incorrect, that you want to address,
Feel free to roast us.
feel free to roast us, and also just know we don't care because we're not attached to any of the things that we said.
Okay, part of having the right mind, I feel like, is the get out of jail free card with whatever comes out of our mouth holes. Like it's really hard to control what we say and why we say it and how we say it. And I feel like I've learned this skill, I'm gonna call it a skill, of just like no filter on my mouth when I talk, from being an astrologer and doing intuitive readings for people, because you can't let your head over process what you're saying, because what you're saying is for the other person and you don't know why you're saying what you're saying, but for them, like, they're supposed to hear it that way. So I'm really grateful that I did tarot readings and astrology readings before human design, because it allowed me to fully trust whatever it is that I say in the moment. And now with human design, I'm like, oh, right mind, like I can say anything and it's correct. It's just like whatever, like no filter, no judgment, no guilt for whatever comes out of me. I just let it be what it is and be like, it's okay, it's just a moment. Hopefully I don't lead anyone into like their demise, which I doubt happens, but yeah.
No,
So we could be wrong about the things we say, but that's okay.
I mean, look, I feel like as long as we give the disclaimer, we could be wrong. We can be wrong about so many things. We're just externally processing basically our experience of the human design deconditioning process. And also going on tangents because, that's part of the 1156.
And the
That's
right
part of my
mind.
unconscious 1156. And I think, ultimately we're both very thoughtful people. And so even if we're not this is not strategic, this is not a strategic podcast. It's not organized. Hopefully you can rest comfortably into it. Maybe it just feels nice to be here and to listen to us talk. So, we'll get more informed, I think, about our internal process as time goes on, but this is just where we are right now.
Yep.
All right, sweet. All right, well, thank you for anyone who decided to listen. This is going to be the vibe.
Feel free
Please.
to share your stories with us if you have your 1156 life experiential stories that you care to share, if you want to be heard, if you want someone to externalize to.
Yes. Or anything else. If you want us to talk about something in particular, we're totally fine with basically talking about anything. So just that's relevant and that we're interested in, and that, all of that. So anyway, thank you for being here. We will catch you on our next episode, which I think will be next week. And
no plan. We don't know. Don't trust that. That's not ego center promise. Okay.
that's just vibes. That's just the vibes that I was feeling. But yeah, that could change at any moment. Trust me. Trust me, it could change. But anyway, thank you for being.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Catch you next time.
Catch you next time. Bye.